It is the 8th of the 10th, 2025. The time is 10 minutes past 10. And as always, that means one thing, that there are a multitude of F1-centric threads at which we need to pull. We'll talk about Carlos Sainz Jr. in line now with the F1 community, who's saying that the production is nonsense. What are we doing here? Why do we need to see all of these bloody... Why do we need to see all of these bloody... wags, as beautiful as they are? Surely you want to focus on some of the bloody movements, some of the overtakes in the dying embers. Surely this makes no sense. Formula One, yes, Lando Norris's missus is very beautiful, but do you think the F1 community want to see her over the action on track? Mention no names: Sir Lewis versus Alonso, Carlos Sainz putting 5 overtaking manoeuvres on as near as makes no difference. 5 consecutive. I think not so too. We'll talk about Apple TV and the fight for the US TV rights to broadcast F1 exclusively. Apparently there is stipulation, there is conjecture at the final hurdle being F1 TV, and what happens to that? Landlocked or now? We'll talk about Maximilian Verstappen and his exploits, because the race have been, all F1 aficionados now pointing the lens at Max Verstappen and what he did at the Singapore Grand Prix as opposed to what King George did. And so too we'll talk about Ferrari at the altar of Oscar Piastri and what's going to happen with that. And so too we'll talk about Racing Bulls, because it feels like it's about to get techier than techie things as far as driver silly season over there. In the first instance, take a look at these Singapore Grand Prix rankings. Of course, King George Russell had to get a perfect 10. He was brilliant, yeeted it into the barrier, but apart from that, he was as near as makes no difference. Perfect all bloody race. God tier from King George Russell of Kingsley, Norfolk. 8.8 out of 10 Maximilian Verstappen. Not a bad drive from the Dutchman, do you know what I mean? He was all right, was Maximilian Verstappen, but for a cheeky Lando Norris impediment in qualifying, you could argue that a 6-1 Maximilian Verstappen would have dropped it on pole and potentially won the race. Jolyon Palmer's done some really good analysis, and we'll talk about that later, where he shows the reason why Maximilian Verstappen and Red Bull opted for the softer compound tyre, because everybody else on the dirty side of the grid, the even number grid place starters, they went backwards, as is the way at the Singapore Grand Prix. Oh, and by the way, cumulative power rankings, and again, these come in as an average of all the accredited F1 journos. None other than Maximilian Verstappen leading the field season today, 8.3 out of 10. What else would you expect, by the way, as far as Maximilian Verstappen is concerned? My mate, the legend that is Tactical Rab F1, I was watching one of his shorts, God tier work over there, by the way, and he says that Max Verstappen doesn't even drink, that he has some water, but they place it conveniently to balance the car, and Max doesn't drink from it because he doesn't want to shift the balance of the car off kilter. Can you spell commitment? Could you place any more eggs in Performance PLC, Maximilian Verstappen? And that's why some are saying that Max could potentially win this championship. He is therefore 4-time, soon to be 5-time champion. Let me tell you about Carlos Sainz quickly, because this is chaos. The F1 community is not having this. How many times do you want to look at WAGs? F1 broadcast. This is nonsense, and I get it, and Carlos Sainz understands that there is value in it. Of course, this is the drive to survive era. We're doing our best as a sport to get and keep attention dollars of the fabled 18 to 35-year-old demographic. I get it, I understand it, but this is now a difference in extents and not kinds. Don't put the camera on Lando Norris's missus, as beautiful as she is, when there is action to be seen on track. Carlos Sainz says it might be good to put the reaction when something's happened to Lando on Lando's missus, or Charles' missus when something happened on track. That makes sense. But to just divert when there's things going on track, career-defining things, mention no name, Carlos Sainz comeback drive of the season. Why are we looking at wives and girlfriends? Here's what Carlos Sainz has to say, quote, and again, more pertinently and succinctly put by Carlos Sainz than I could ever dream of. He says, quote, yes, it's becoming a bit of a trend which must have worked for the broadcast team for one time when people found it interesting to see our girlfriends, to see famous people on television and their reactions subsequent. He continues, I understand that if there is an overtake, a very intense moment in the race, it's understandable that the production team might want to show a reaction shot after the fact. If they've seen that this worked in the past, but important moments of the race last weekend, they didn't show any of the 4 or 5 overtakes that I did at the end, nor did they show Fernando Alonso's pursuit of Sir Lewis Hamilton. They missed a lot of things. The other thing is fine, but don't lose sight of the main thing for me. For me, they even exaggerate a little bit by showing the celebrities and girlfriends, and the community concurs. We are here for racing. Of course, that's an addendum. If there's nothing going on track, then show us the celebrities that are there and their reactions. Sure, I get it. It makes sense. It is the drive. I get it. I don't want to sound like an old grizzled F1 vet back in the day, 1950. I understand it, but yet and still, difference in extents and not kinds, and the community is none too pleased, raging on all the forums, all the Reddits. How comes we didn't get to see Lewis and Alonso? Lest we forget 2007. This is a rivalry. We only got to see the bloody aftermath on the Twitters with Lewis Hamilton taking a bit and seeing the radio messages of Fernando Alonso again after the fact, just to satisfy the Gooner demographic. Miami, I don't disagree. TV director needs to be fired. If I want to see beautiful women, I would go to but it's true. Most of us are here to see some racing. When there's no racing on track and it's boring and you need to fill for time, okay, copy. But there was racing going on track between, of course, per Sainz, him and the rest of the bloods that were in front of him, nailing 5 overtaking manoeuvres on one flipping lap. So too, Lewis and Alonso, and nobody got to see it. Oh, and by the way, when we talk about some Oscar Piastri, it's getting techier than techie things for Oscar Piastri. This news story, Papaya rules, Lando Norris favouritism, it's not going anywhere. We're going to be talking about it ad nauseum between now and the next Grand Prix, potentially between now and race 24. Here's what the Australian press and media, and again, the context is important here. I've said on a gazillion occasions, and I will reiterate for the avoidance of doubt. I'm not saying that there is sabotage or favouritism at McLaren, but I can see and I can forgive Oscar Piastri fans around the world and neutrals alike for thinking that there might be, because the evidence at this point is far too multitudinous. Monza, Australia, British Grand Prix, Hungary, Singapore now. It feels like more consistently inconsistent are McLaren being, as far as the way in which they institute the Papaya rules, than the FIA at this stage. Check this out, because the Australian media are cottoning onto it too.
Newspaper Blick is reporting Oscar Piastri could incredibly leave McLaren after the next F1 season.
Yeah, the Australian is on an undisclosed multi-year deal, but his people are rumoured to be less than pleased at how team bosses are favouring Lando Norris. And they are, aren't they?
Yeah.
Piastri leads the drivers' standings ahead of the United States Grand Prix next weekend.
Newspaper.
Oh, the humanity. Listen. There it is, Exhibit A, B and C. People are talking about this now by dint of the Blick article. That insinuates that the one they call Oscar Piastri might be on the move. And as well he might be. It's getting techier than techie things, especially when you understand the length and breadth, the full extent of how peeved off a usually unflappable Oscar Piastri was in the car.
Oscar, we now think we should take the safety car for a soft. Just let me know if you strongly disagree.
I don't know what to do right now. You do whatever you think is best.
Copy that, we've got it. Oscar, we now think...
Techier than techie things, not interested, mate. Do whatever you want, Oscar Piastri. And then is your Exhibit C. Again, we've gone through all these already, but the context here is key. Roll this next clip.
Fire fans, it might not have been the result we wanted here in Singapore, but we've wrapped up the Constructors' Championship in an incredible way. 6 rounds to go. It's been an amazing year. We've been able to dominate races. We've had a dominant car, and that's all down to, well, this guy here in the middle, a bit of us, and everyone back in the factory. Over 1,000 people altogether. So incredible. We're the champions. But a big part of that is also down to you cheering us on every weekend, in the fans, in the crowds, wearing all papaya. So thank you very much. We hope you celebrate just as much as the guys and girls in here are going to do.
Blink twice, Oscar Piastri, if you need our help. He looks like a hostage there, like he's there under duress while Lando Norris corporate peacocks and pretends to be the leader of the team. A bit of us, mate. You're not even leading the championship of the drivers' variety, Lando Norris. He does this thing, does Lando. There's something, I mean, I'm rooting for Lando. I want him to fulfill his not insubstantial potential. I do desperately. He's not a bad peddler, Lando, when he's had his Weetabix. But when he has a good day like this and he comes out and starts talking this way, I mean, he doesn't necessarily endear himself to the Aussies, Max says. More importantly, it feels like they are, feels and smells and looks like they are, and this is what it results in. Ferrari Focus today coming out and saying that, again, quoting the Blick article that claims the current championship leader, no other than OJP, Oscar Piastri, already has his sights set on a move to Ferrari in 2027. Now, for the avoidance of that, all F1 journalistic publications are created equal, but some are created more equal than others. Do you trust this? Not necessarily. It feels and looks like driver's silly season, but that it's out there and people are talking about it may potentially be instrumental in McLaren deciding how they go forward here on in. Again, if you're going to put all your marbles, forget 2025 and 26, 27 even. If you're talking longer term, which one of OJP and Lando Norris have the greater performance upside? You've got to go OJP every single time. Now, if we're having the commercial conversation, then that's something different, a different entity altogether. Of course, it's Lando Norris, but then again, there's a line of best fit, and how you keep both of them at the team will define potentially the next McLaren era and potentially the story of F1 over the next 5 to 10 years. Oh, and by the way, if we're talking about Maximilian Verstappen, which we must, Martin Brundle, over the course of the Singapore Grand Prix weekend, said the following: that McLaren need to be careful because it feels like Max is in both drivers' head. Tom Clarkson of F1 Nation underscores that point, alluding to the fact that Max might have been quite tricky, crafty indeed, in bringing about the collision between the McLaren pairing on lap 1. Roll the clip.
Max will take a lot from today. I think he'll take a lot from the fact I think he thinks he's going to get in their heads. And when you've got a Max who thinks that and he's chasing, and when was the last time we saw Max chasing for a title? Because, you know, through his successes these last 4 years, he's pretty much had the rub of the green.
And talking of getting in their heads, I thought everything that Max said after qualifying about, you know, Lando giving him dirty air, I'm going to remember that going forward. He was playing with Lando, I felt.
He was playing, of course, with Lando's mental fortitude, but was Max Verstappen playing with Lando on track in his ability in the car, his racecraft or lack thereof, and his ability to be as forensic as far as his car placement as is his old mate OJP and Maximilian Verstappen? Who knows? But by the way, Apple is going to get techie over there, because Apple have been fighting desperately on the back of the success of the F1 movie to get their hands on the exclusive rights for F1 in the US. Here's what we know. Previously, it was ESPN who got a steal a few years back and had been paying since $5 million US, but this was pre-Drive to Survive. This was pre-2021 and pre-COVID. Since then, F1 has done one of these. The share price is now $105 US. There are more attention dollars on Formula One than there has been erstwhile, as long as I can remember. Now, therefore, the price was here. It's now here. ESPN don't want to pay up to $150 million a year, but you know who does? Apple, because they've seen what the F1 movie can do. $650 million gross at the box office. That's Brad Pitt's highest grossing film. ESPN are so keen to get themselves into the F1 business that they're prepared to pay $150 million US per annum. However, there is one sticking point. What happens to F1 TV? Let me read you this out, and courtesy of the John Orand report/blog. The long gestated streaming rights deal between Apple and Formula One is apparently reaching the finishing line. In his newsletter, he says that the two sides have nearly finalised negotiations with an eye to announce the partnership at the upcoming US Grand Prix on 17th, over the course of the 17th to the 19th of October, held in Austin. Apparently, the protracted discussions relate to a dispute over the existence of the independent F1's TV streaming service in the United States. You know what happens? F1 TV over in the UK, we don't get it, because Sky F1 have the exclusive rights. They don't want broadcasters or potential viewers and subscribers to sack off their £90 a month and go and pay £150 a year to F1 TV, and that's why they've landlocked it. A similar discussion is being held between F1 and Apple, because that's what they want to happen in the United States of America. They don't want for the F1 TV streaming platform to detract from Apple TV subscriptions. Apple, therefore, willing to pay $150 million a year for the rights. They want streaming exclusivity, and therefore for F1 TV to fade away into the distance. Oh, the humanity. How do you splice this? I think if F1 TV goes away, it will be bad for definitely bad for US F1 fans, because they'll have to pay more cumulatively to Apple. But I don't know, something about the Apple partnership, it feels like F1's going in the right direction, partnering with Apple. $100 gazillion billion is how much they've got in cash and cash equivalents. So therefore, why not? F1, go for it, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury. Oh, and by the way, I've got to talk about some Yuki Tsunoda and some Liam Lawson. There's been rumours abound for a while, speaking of the probability that Yuki Tsunoda can stay at Racing Bulls. It's techie, this. It is techie, because in my own mind, Tsunoda-san's always been a Honda driver more than he's been a Red Bull driver. Here's why it gets techie. I don't think Yuki's been brilliant this year. In fact, far from it. 7 races back-to-back, scoring 0 points. That's world record-breaking settings as far as Red Bull driver underperformance. Ergo, no driver has gone, in Red Bull history, has gone 7 races back-to-back not having scored points. Yuki Tsunoda, therefore, is gonzo. That's unacceptable levels of underperformance. That would make Checo Perez laugh. He'll be looking at all of us who were cursing him last year, saying, I told you the car was hard to drive. So Tsunoda, I think, will be gone, therefore. And he was never part of the Red Bull family. Let's be honest, not proper, not like Danny Rick, not like Max Verstappen, not like Checo Perez was. I think Tsunoda-san was there by dint of the $20 million a year that Honda said that they were going to sponsor, pay driver settings for Tsunoda's seat at the big team. He'll be gone, potentially to Aston Martin as a reserve driver, again under the aegis of the relationship between Honda now and Aston Martin potentially. But more pertinently, it's Lawson. As people have talked about Lawson, but you saw him over the weekend. He's been peaky, hasn't he? And trophy over the course of the Singapore Grand Prix. Yeets it into the barrier in FP2, yeets it into the barrier in FP3. And over the course of the Singapore Grand Prix weekend, we hear that Alex Stern's contract with McLaren has been severed. What is that all about? Lest we forget, correlation does not necessarily imply causation. Potentially a nothing burger, potentially a Poffoneer. But the timing, we smelled a rat. Alex Stern potentially to Racing Bulls in 2026, potentially. Because when you hear Helmut Marko said of the Alex Stern circumstance that, yeah, we haven't had conversations yet. But rest assured, Alex Stern absolutely fits the profile of the driver that we would like to have. And when you hear somebody as influential, a C-suite bod, as senior as Dr. Helmut Marko talking about that way as far as a driver's concerned, then you bet your bottom dollar that Helmut Marko will do his damnedest to sign one Alex Stern. But the only reason why they do that is because they're not satisfied with their current driver portfolio. Over the course of the last 24 hours, Simon Lazenby of Sky Sports F1 went on to say that this is important now. And again, those guys, internationally syndicated broadcaster, they're as near as makes no difference every weekend. And sometimes you got to defer to those who are closest to the F1 blast radius. Here's what Simon said on the F1 Show podcast.
Yeah, but Yuki didn't step up again. Took a step backwards, didn't he, Ted?
Yes, I mean, he didn't have the new front wing. It's not known whether he would have liked it. Obviously, we can't know. There was only one of them. But having understood some key parts of the car, both in qualifying and the race, he wasn't able, for various reasons, to deliver that. Let's give Yuki, and Red Bull will give Yuki a few more chances. Well, Red Bull will give him to the end of the season. But before we judge whether he's made that step forward in Baku was accurate, let's see what happens in Austin in a more usual. And he got a duff start as well, dropped well back. So let's give him one more chance in Austin before we make a call on whether the Baku improvement was a flash in the pan or not.
Unless the call's already been made. I get the feeling, and the early whispers are, you might get 2 new drivers in Racing Bulls next year. Jamie, would you heard anything on that?
As suspected, Simon, ergo, ipso facto, here's what we're looking at for next year. Alex Dunn will get the promotion potentially in 2026 to Racing Bulls, alongside who? Arvid Lindblad. Now, Arvid hasn't been fantastic, as you guys are talking about in the chat, but Helmut Marko likes him. The last year around Silverstone in changeable conditions where you will see the greats come to the fore. Cream always rises to the top. Arvid Lindblad did something then that reminded Dr. Helmut Marko of Max Verstappen years ago at the Norris Ring. Worked his way through the field, looked like Max Verstappen in 2016 around Brazil, 2024 too. That's how you know, that's how you can smell out potential, right? When drivers can do like Arvid Lindblad did around Silverstone, you got to promote them, give them the opportunity. There is asymmetric risk. Arvid is 100% in, 100% Max. Even he needs another season in F2 or Super Formula. Potentially, mate, but sometimes when you've got spaces, when there are seats to fill, bums on seats are needed. Sometimes, if you're good enough, then you're old enough. They'll promote Lindblad. Here's, again, you take this one to the bank. Here's my prediction, given what Simon's just said. They'll promote Arvid Lindblad, and Alex Dunn will be in that seat, the Racing Bulls seat in 2026. Alongside Maximilian Verstappen, they will promote Isaac Hadjar because he's been the rookie of the year. Jamie Chadwick goes on to say that they want the next Max Verstappen do Red Bull. I would disagree ever so slightly, because Dr. Helmut Marko's come out and he's told us that would be an exercise in futility. They're not after the next Max Verstappen because there is only one of him potentially ever in F1 history. What they want is the next Red Bull champion, and that dude might look like Arvid Lindblad, and he may even look like Alex Dunn. But to find out definitively, they'll need to promote him in 2026, sign him, and then promote him in 2026 to a Racing Bulls seat. That was like a little devil from the box. He could get points 1000%. Done for 2027, reserved for 2026. If you don't have a benchmark on a rules change, then you are correct. I hear you, Max. I hear you. But if Simon's saying that Liam Lawson's done, I'll go with him. Sky Sports broadcast, internationally syndicated, spends all his life up and down the paddock. I think they get rid of Liam Lawson. Well, then potentially maybe they do Yuki Tsunoda alongside Arvid Lindblad. Oh, the humanity. But if Tsunoda stands 7 races back to back and he hasn't scored any points, you think they're going to tolerate that? And now that they won't be getting the 20 million from Honda, listen, I think it's done. I think just go with roll the dice, right? Promote Dunn, promote, sign and promote Dunn, promote the one that they call Arvid Lindblad. It will get techier than techie things. Back again at 8 p.m. You guys have been legends. Between now and next time, the prosecution rests. No further questions.